I threw my fiancé's ring into a river during an argument because he said he needed space, then demanded he apologize, buy a new ring, and move on, but my entitled fiancé called off the wedding and left me. I want to tell you that there was a version of that night where I was the victim. I rehearsed it in my head for weeks afterward, the story where Michael was cold and distant and I was just a woman pushed to her limit, acting out of pain. I told that version to my mom. I told it to my friends. I posted a carefully worded version of it on my private Instagram story at 2 a.m. and watched the sympathy pour in from people who only had my side. And for a little while, that version felt real. It felt like armor. But here I am, 8 months later, sitting in my childhood bedroom at 31 years old, surrounded by boxes of a life I used to have, and I cannot keep telling myself that story. Because the truth is I knew exactly what I was doing when I pulled that ring off my finger. I knew exactly what I was communicating. And when I watched it hit the dark water and disappear, some ugly, entitled part of me actually felt satisfied. Like I had won something. Like I had made a point he would never forget. I made a point, all right. Michael and I had been together for 4 years before he proposed. 4 years of what I genuinely believed was a solid, loving relationship. He was an engineer, steady and quiet and thoughtful in the way that used to feel like a gift and later, in the warped logic I developed somewhere around year 3, started to feel like neglect. He remembered things. My coffee order, the name of my childhood cat, the specific way I liked the blinds angled in the morning so the light hit the room without being harsh. He showed up. Not in the grand gesture way my friends' boyfriends sometimes did, not with flash or drama, but in the consistent, present, dependable way that I now understand is actually rarer and more valuable than anything I thought I was missing. He proposed on a Thursday. Not a Saturday at sunset, not during a vacation or a milestone moment. A Thursday evening in our apartment, after dinner, when I was still in my work clothes and my hair was pulled back and there was nothing cinematic about it at all. He just looked at me and said he didn't want to wait for the right moment because every moment with me already felt right, and then he got down on one knee and showed me a ring he had spent 4 months saving for. It was simple. A solitaire. Elegant and clean and exactly what I had described to him once, casually, during a conversation I had half forgotten. He had not forgotten. I said yes and I meant it, and for about 6 months, everything was fine. Then the cracks started. Or rather, then I started manufacturing cracks because something inside me had gotten restless and dissatisfied, and I did not have the self-awareness to examine why. I just knew that Michael was busy with a major project at work and less available than usual, and that my friend Danielle had just gotten engaged to a man who sent her flowers every week and planned elaborate date nights and posted long captions about her on Instagram, and that somewhere in the comparison between Michael's quiet devotion and Danielle's boyfriend's performative romance, I had started to feel cheated. This is embarrassing to write. It is humiliating to admit that I let Instagram aesthetics and my friend's relationship make me question a genuinely good man. But I am trying to be honest here because dishonesty is what got me to the river. Danielle was not a malicious person, but she had opinions and she shared them freely and often. She said things like you deserve to be chosen loudly, and if he wanted to, he would, and she forwarded me TikToks about emotional unavailability, love languages, and men who were comfortable rather than in love. She was building a case without realizing she was building a case, and I was a willing jury because I was already looking for evidence. I started picking fights. Small ones at first. Why hadn't he planned anything for our 6-month engagement anniversary? Why did he always wait for me to initiate certain conversations? Why did he seem distracted when we talked about wedding venues? I catalogued every imperfection and presented it to myself as proof of something larger and more sinister than the reality, which was simply that Michael was a human being going through a stressful period at work and still loving me consistently throughout it. He never raised his voice at me once during this period. Not once. He would listen to my complaints and respond with patience that I mistook for passivity. Looking back, I think he was doing the mature thing, the thing I was incapable of doing, which was choosing not to escalate. I interpreted his calm as not caring enough to fight for me. I was an idiot. A self-righteous, entitled, narrative-addicted idiot. The night of the ring happened 3 weeks before our wedding date. We had been arguing more frequently by then, and the arguments had a pattern that I can now see clearly was entirely of my own making. I would find something to be upset about, escalate it beyond its actual size, and then when Michael responded with measured frustration rather than dramatic devastation, I would interpret his measured response as confirmation that he did not love me the way I deserved. That night, the argument started because he had mentioned, carefully and gently, that he needed a weekend to himself. Not a break from us. A weekend. To decompress, to visit his brother out of state, to get his head right before the wedding. He had been working 60-hour weeks for 2 months. He looked exhausted in the way that goes bone deep. And when he said he needed a little space to breathe, he touched my hand when he said it and looked at me with eyes that were asking for understanding. I did not give him understanding. Something about the word space detonated in my chest like it was a code word, like it meant something Danielle's TikToks had told me it meant. I heard space and I translated it into I'm pulling away, and I translated that into he doesn't really want this, and within minutes I had constructed an entire architecture of abandonment from one reasonable request by a tired man who loved me. I told him he was emotionally unavailable. I told him that a man who actually wanted to marry me would not be asking for space 3 weeks before our wedding. I told him that I had spent 4 years watching him half show up and I was done performing gratitude for the bare minimum. He went quiet. The specific quiet that I had learned to weaponize in arguments, that I always told myself was stonewalling, but that was actually, I now understand, a man trying desperately not to say something he would regret. We were walking along the river path near our apartment. We walked there sometimes in the evenings. It had been a good place for us, once. I pulled the ring off my finger. I want to be precise about the sequence of events here because it matters. He had not threatened to call off the engagement. He had not said anything cruel. He had asked for a weekend. That was the entire transgression that led to what I did next. I held the ring out over the water and I said something like, maybe you need more than a weekend. He looked at my hand. He looked at my face. He said, don't. And I dropped it. Not through. I want to own the word correctly. I opened my fingers and let it fall, and we both watched it catch the light for 1/2 second before it hit the surface and was gone. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever experienced. Here is the part that reveals exactly who I was in that moment. After a few seconds of silence, I turned to him and said, "Are you going to say something?" I was expecting an apology. I want you to understand that. I was standing on a riverbank having just dropped a $4,000 ring that he had saved for into the water, and I was waiting for him to apologize to me for making me feel the way I felt. Michael looked at me for a long time. His face did something I had never seen it do before. It didn't go angry. It went tired in a final kind of way, like a door closing rather than slamming. And he said, very quietly, "I don't know who you are right now." Then he turned around and walked back toward our apartment. I followed him, talking the whole way, explaining myself, explaining why he had driven me to it, explaining that if he had just been more present and more attentive and more willing to fight for us, then I would not have felt the need to make such a dramatic statement. I used the word statement. I called destroying a ring he had sacrificed to buy me a statement. He did not respond. He walked into our apartment, went to the bedroom, and when I followed him in there, he was pulling a bag from the closet. I finally stopped talking. He packed enough for a few days without saying a word. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom we had shared for 2 years and I watched him, and the first real flicker of fear arrived. Not remorse. Not yet. Still mostly fear that I had gone too far and needed to fix it before it became permanent. "Michael," I said. He zipped the bag. He picked it up. "Michael, we can talk about this." He walked past me to the front door, and right before he opened it, he turned and looked at me one more time. His eyes were red but dry. He had not cried. He looked like a man who had already made a decision. "I'll come get the rest of my things when you're not here," he said. "I'll reach out through a mutual friend about logistics." "Logistics?" I said. "What logistics?" "The wedding," he said. "Canceling it." And he left. I did not believe it was real for the first 48 hours. I called my mother, I told her my version. She was appropriately horrified on my behalf. I texted Danielle and she came over and sat on my couch and told me that any man who would walk out over a ring clearly wasn't ready to be a husband. I posted on my private story, vague enough to seem mysterious, and the comments told me I deserved better. I sat inside this wall of validation and told myself he would come back. That he was emotional and needed time to cool off, and that when he did, he would see that I had acted out of love and hurt, and that the ring was replaceable, and that we were more important than a piece of jewelry. I had an entire script ready for when he called. How I would be vulnerable and honest, and he would soften and we would cry together, and he would say he understood and we would be stronger for having gone through it. He did not call. On day 3, a text came from Michael's friend Thomas, asking me to let him know when I would be out of the apartment for a few hours. Not from Michael. From Thomas. I texted Michael directly and said we needed to talk. He responded, "I'll have Thomas coordinate the rest." That was the first moment it hit me that this was not a dramatic pause in our love story. This was not a chapter. This was the end. And I had written it myself, on a riverbank, with my own hand. I still asked him to buy a new ring. I am burning with shame writing this, but it is true and I need to say it. About a week after he left, still half convinced that this was salvageable, I called him. He actually answered, which surprised me. I think he answered to have a clear, final conversation, and instead he got me at my worst. I told him that I understood things had gotten heated but that the ring had been a symbol and not the actual issue, and that if he was serious about marrying me he could replace the ring and we could reset and move forward. I said the word reset. Like our engagement was a phone that needed to be rebooted. The silence on the other end of that call was different from the silence on the riverbank. This one was almost gentle. Like he felt sorry for me. "I'm not buying another ring," he said. "I'm not marrying you. I want you to hear that clearly so you're not waiting for something that isn't coming. You're really going to throw away 4 years because I had a moment?" I said. "I'm not throwing away 4 years," he said. "I'm accepting who you showed me you are." He hung up. I sat on the floor of our apartment for what felt like a long time after that. The apartment that was technically in his name because he had been paying the majority of the rent. The apartment that I was going to have to leave. The wedding that 200 people had been invited to, that had a venue deposit and a caterer and a florist and a photographer. The wedding that was 3 weeks away. The weight of what I had done landed on me all at once and it was staggering. But here is the cruelest trick my ego played on me in those early days. Even then, even under the weight of it, a part of me still thought he was the one who should be apologizing. It would take me much longer to dig that part out. The venue had to be notified. The caterer. The photographer. The florist. His family, my family, the 200 guests. Every single one of those phone calls and emails and texts was a fresh layer of public humiliation. His mother handled her side and my mother handled ours, and I sat in the middle of the collapse like a stunned animal while the life I had built was quietly dismantled around me. My mother asked me, privately, what happened? Really happened? And I told her my version again, and this time, hearing it out loud to a parent who loved me but was not Danielle, I heard the holes in it. I heard how he asked for space sounded when it was the entire justification. She didn't say much. She has this way of getting quiet when she's deeply worried about me, and she went very quiet, and then she said, "Sweetheart, you threw the ring into the river." "I know," I said. "You need to understand that that's what people are going to remember." She was right. And I had no idea yet just how right she was going to be. I still asked him to buy a new ring. I am burning with shame writing this, but it is true and I need to say it. About a week after he left, still half convinced that this was salvageable, I called him. He actually answered, which surprised me. I think he answered to have a clear, final conversation, and instead he got me at my worst. I told him that I understood things had gotten heated but that the ring had been a symbol and not the actual issue, and that if he was serious about marrying me he could replace the ring and we could reset and move forward. I said the word reset. Like our engagement was a phone that needed to be rebooted. The silence on the other end of that call was different from the silence on the riverbank. This one was almost gentle. Like he felt sorry for me. "I'm not buying another ring," he said. "I'm not marrying you. I want you to hear that clearly so you're not waiting for something that isn't coming. You're really going to throw away 4 years because I had a moment?" I said. "I'm not throwing away 4 years," he said. "I'm accepting who you showed me you are." He hung up. I sat on the floor of our apartment for what felt like a long time after that. The apartment that was technically in his name because he had been paying the majority of the rent. The apartment that I was going to have to leave. The wedding that 200 people had been invited to, that had a venue deposit and a caterer and a florist and a photographer. The wedding that was 3 weeks away. The weight of what I had done landed on me all at once and it was staggering. But here is the cruelest trick my ego played on me in those early days. Even then, even under the weight of it, a part of me still thought he was the one who should be apologizing. It would take me much longer to dig that part out. The venue had to be notified. The caterer. The photographer. The florist. His family, my family, the 200 guests. Every single one of those phone calls and emails and texts was a fresh layer of public humiliation. His mother handled her side and my mother handled ours, and I sat in the middle of the collapse like a stunned animal while the life I had built was quietly dismantled around me. My mother asked me, privately, what happened? Really happened? And I told her my version again, and this time, hearing it out loud to a parent who loved me but was not Danielle, I heard the holes in it. I heard how he asked for space sounded when it was the entire justification. She didn't say much. She has this way of getting quiet when she's deeply worried about me, and she went very quiet, and then she said, "Sweetheart, you threw the ring into the river." "I know," I said. "You need to understand that that's what people are going to remember." She was right. And I had no idea yet just how right she was going to be. He had not sent screenshots or made accusations or built a case against me in group chats. He had simply, quietly, told the truth when asked. That I had thrown the ring in the river over an argument about needing space. That when I called afterward, I had asked him to buy a new one and apologize. That he had decided the wedding was not something he could proceed with in good conscience. That was all. Just the facts. And the facts were enough. You do not need dramatic embellishment when the facts are that you dropped a $4,000 ring that someone sacrificed to give you into a river and then asked that person to apologize. Danielle stuck by me the longest. She is loyal in the way that people who have helped construct your narrative are loyal. She had too much investment in the story she had told alongside me to easily revise it. But even she started to pull back around month 2. I noticed it in the way she responded to my venting. The first month, she had matched my energy, agreed with my assessments, reinforced my victimhood. By month 2, she was responding with things like "I hear you and that's really hard" instead of "he's wrong and you deserve better." The validation had a shorter half-life than the reality. We had one conversation where she finally said, gently, that maybe she had not been the best influence during the engagement. That some of the things she had shared with me, the TikToks, the conversations about what I deserved, might have pushed me in directions that were not healthy. She said it carefully and kindly, and I responded defensively, and we did not talk for 3 weeks after that. When we started talking again, something had shifted. She still cared about me. But she was no longer my co-author. The mutual friends who knew us both and tried to stay neutral eventually drifted toward Michael's orbit. Not because he campaigned for them. I think because being around him required nothing complicated, and being around me required navigating the ongoing wreckage of my self-justification. I was exhausting in my grief. I kept needing people to confirm that I had not been the villain, and the more time passed, the less anyone was willing to keep performing that confirmation. There was one night, about 3 months in, when I found out through social media that a group of our mutual friends had had a dinner together. Michael was not there, as far as I could tell. But I also had not been invited. I sat alone in my childhood bedroom and scrolled through the photos posted from that dinner, and I felt the specific, particular loneliness of being edited out. Of the group having learned to exist around the shape of me without including me in it. I had no one to blame for this. That was the part I was slowly learning to sit with. Work was its own battlefield. I had told some colleagues about the wedding when I got engaged. It is normal and human to share that kind of news with people you spend 40 hours a week with. Which meant that when the wedding was cancelled, the questions came. People meant well, mostly. They asked with concern and got my version and nodded sympathetically. But in a small office, a story has a way of completing itself over time. Someone knew someone who knew Michael's colleague. The fuller picture arrived in the way it always does, in fragments, in overheard hallway conversations, in the slight shift in how certain people treated me. My manager pulled me aside in month 2 and mentioned, professionally and carefully, that my work output had taken a noticeable dip. That I seemed distracted and she was worried about me. She was right to be worried. I was distracted. I was sitting at my desk replaying conversations and drafting text messages I never sent and refreshing Michael's social media to look for any sign that he was suffering even a fraction as visibly as I was. He was not posting much. What he did post was neutral. A hiking photo. A congratulations message for a colleague's promotion. Once, a picture of his brother's new baby with a caption that was so normal and warm and unmarked by the catastrophe of our ending that I cried for an hour at my childhood desk in the pale glow of my laptop. He had moved on. Not happily, maybe. Not without pain. But forward. He had moved forward and I was still standing on the riverbank. My family tried. My parents were careful not to say too much. My mother had already told me what needed to be said. She repeated it only once more, about 2 months in, when I suggested that maybe Michael would come around eventually and we could at least have a conversation about what had happened. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table and said, with a steady, aching love that is one of the harder things a parent can offer, "Honey, I don't think there's a conversation left to have. I think the kindest thing you can do for yourself right now is stop looking for a door that isn't there." My dad just patted my shoulder a lot and made me sandwiches, and did not say very much at all, which was its own kind of tender that I did not deserve as much as he gave it. My brother was the most honest. He sat with me one night and said, "You know I love you. And I think you know what actually happened." He did not elaborate. He just let that sit. He was right. I was knowing it more every day. The knowing was not comfortable. The knowing was the slow, grinding process of dismantling a self-image I had built over a lifetime, the image of myself as someone who, when wronged, responded. Someone whose emotions were justified by their intensity. Someone who deserved to be fought for in proportion to the force she brought to a fight. What I was actually learning was that intensity is not the same as rightness. And that some people, when they see who you really are in a moment of pressure, simply choose to believe what they see. I tried to reach him once more. This is the part I am most ashamed of, not the ring, but this. It was about 4 months after he left. I had not spoken to him directly since the phone call where he told me clearly that he was not buying another ring and not marrying me. I had respected that silence mostly because I had been too busy constructing elaborate grievances to initiate contact, and partly because some part of me that was slowly growing wiser kept telling me that nothing good would come of it. But 4 months in, I broke. I wrote him a letter. An actual letter, by hand, which I then mailed to his mother's address because I did not have his new address and I was not going to ask Thomas for it. The letter was genuine. I mean that. I did not write it to get him back. I wrote it because I needed him to know that I understood, finally and fully, what I had done. That the ring was not the point. That the ring had been a symptom of something broken in me that I had refused to look at, and that in my refusal to look at it I had turned it outward and aimed it at him. That he had not deserved any of it. Not the fights. Not the resentments I had nurtured on a diet of comparison and social media and friends who told me I deserved more when what I actually needed was to deserve what I already had. I don't know if he read it. I received no response. His mother, who had once referred to me warmly as her future daughter-in-law, did not acknowledge it either. I don't know if she forwarded it to him or threw it away or left it unopened on a counter somewhere. I will never know. The not knowing is one of the things I have had to learn to hold. There is a particular quality to the loneliness of being ghosted by an entire life. It is different from regular loneliness. Regular loneliness has edges. This kind is total. It is the loneliness of having been in a specific world, a world of shared rituals and inside jokes and plans and a person who knew the name of your childhood cat, and then waking up one day and finding that world not just gone but sealed. No door back in. Not even a window to look through. Just a wall where a life used to be. I thought about the wedding a lot in those months. Not because I wanted it back, not exactly, but because I kept circling the image of what it had almost been. 200 people. A venue with string lights over a dance floor. A dress I had chosen in December and that was now hanging in a bag in my parents' closet because I could not decide what to do with it. A future that had been real enough to plan and deposit pay and RSVP collect and then, in one night on a riverbank, had become nothing. I thought about his face when I held the ring over the water. The look that was not anger. The look that was something worse, something final, something that said he was looking at me and finally seeing the whole picture. I thought about the word don't and how simply he had said it and how I had not listened. The dress is still there, in the closet. I have not been able to sell it and I have not been able to throw it away. My mother does not push me on it. She understands, I think, that it is the last physical object left from that chapter and that I am not ready to be rid of it. Or maybe I am keeping it as a kind of penance. A reminder that hangs in a bag in a closet in my childhood home to tell me every time I open that door, this is what you had, and this is what you did with it. Danielle got married in the spring. She invited me and I went. I sat at a table with people I half knew and watched her dance with her husband who posts long captions about her on Instagram and sends her flowers every week, and I thought, with a grief that surprised me with its gentleness, good for her. I mean that without bitterness. She has what she has. I had what I had and I let it go over a word. Space. He had asked for a weekend. I am trying, now, to build something. Not a comeback, not a redemption arc, because life is not a Netflix series, and I do not get a second season where I emerge healed and worthy and ready for the love I should have protected. I'm just trying to be honest. To look at the specific mechanism of my own selfishness, and understand how it was built so that I cannot unconsciously rebuild it somewhere else. I am in therapy. My therapist has a way of asking questions that make me do the uncomfortable work of following my own logic to its source. She asked me once when I first started feeling like Michael was not enough, and when I traced it back honestly, it was not anything he had done. It was a feeling I imported into the relationship from outside. From Danielle's comments and the TikToks and the low-grade anxiety I had about whether my life looked as good as other people's lives looked online. Michael had not changed. My perception of him had been quietly colonized by a standard he never knew he was being measured against. And when he failed to meet that imported standard, I punished him. Over and over and finally, permanently. He deserved none of it. I do not look at his social media anymore. That choice took longer than I would like to admit, but I made it and I have kept it. Part of the honesty project is accepting that his life is no longer information I am entitled to. He gave me 4 years of consistent, quiet love and I spent the last portion of it manufacturing reasons to be unhappy and then, when he asked for one weekend, I dropped his ring in a river and told myself I was the wrong party. His life now is his. I lost the right to even curiosity about it on a Thursday evening when I opened my hand over dark water. I think about the women who might be reading this, wherever you are in your relationship, whoever you are. And I want to say something directly. If you have a man who remembers how you take your coffee and shows up every time and loves you in the quiet, consistent way that does not photograph well, and does not produce the kind of content that gets engagement. Look at him. Really look at him. Not through the filter of what your friends have or what the algorithm tells you that you deserve. Look at him as he is. Because I looked away. I looked at the comparison and the performance and the idea of something more cinematic, and in looking away, I did not see what I was doing to something real with my own hands, until those hands were empty and the ring was at the bottom of a river and the best person I ever had was walking down a path away from me without looking back. And the worst thing, the thing that wakes me up sometimes in my narrow childhood bed, is that he was right not to look back. He was right about all of it. The man I had spent 6 months calling emotionally unavailable had, in the end, done the single most emotionally intelligent thing either of us had done in a year. He looked at who I was in that moment, and he chose himself. I did not know how to choose either of us. 8 months later, the ring is still in that river. I know exactly where it is, the curve of the path, the railing, the particular dark of that water in the evening light. I went back there once, a few weeks after he left, like I was going to find it. Like it would be sitting there waiting on the surface. The river doesn't keep things for you. It just takes them and moves them somewhere you will never find, and keeps moving. That is all a river does. I know that now. I wish I had known it sooner. I wish I had known it before I stood on that path and chose a dramatic gesture over a man who had done nothing except love me steadily and ask, once, for a weekend. I deserved better, Danielle used to say. I deserved better. What a thing to tell yourself while burning down the best thing you had. What a thing.